Good morning to people who watch this later. This is our thought for the day, our guidepost. The poem I've got today, I wrote back in 2018. It's called Before. We live in a sensory universe. We have a body that manifests or holds our divine essence. And yet, before our thoughts and feelings existed, we were and still are connected to everything and everyone. We can sense the changing energy around us. Before our mind, before the thought I am, before the idea of a body, before the idea of a world, before we were given a name, we were not separate. We knew we belonged. Through our interaction here, we began to identify ourselves as separate individuals, and so the pain began. Forget the pain, remember before. So in this, I'm just trying to highlight the fact that we all belong together, we are one. And it's only in our existence within the 3D, 4D world that we're actually feeling pain. We didn't feel pain when all that existed was love, when all that existed was consciousness, when we were part of that consciousness, and we still are. So all we've got to do is to remember the before, remember when we were in that place of bliss, and stop harping on about the things that are so 3D, 4D, and start belonging to each other. So I think it was very similar to what you were saying earlier. I think it was probably yesterday we were talking about this, or the day before rather. So any thoughts on before?
Well, what came to mind as you were reading the poem, Andrew, was, and I've not experienced this because I haven't had children, but I've heard people say, like, before they have children, and then when they go through childbirth, all the pain that they go through, and then afterwards they don't remember the pain. They just see this beautiful life and this bond of this love with this child, and everything that went before is just gone because they're just in that feeling of love. I don't know why that came to mind. Like the rebirth, I suppose, you know, when people go through what we term as rebirth, they transform. Sometimes we forget the person that we used to be, you know, the identity that we had, because we're now in this place of where we feel new and feeling this immense love. You know, when we go through these periods of death and rebirth, and that's kind of what came to mind for me.
Yeah, I think that maybe this poem, in my mind, it was trying to help people who hadn't gone through a transformational experience, who hadn't shifted, that there is this place where they existed before and that they can exist again now. Their consciousness can be brought forward into this place that they understood before, which had no pain. But yeah, you're quite correct in pointing out that to get to that, whether it's what I was talking about, I think it was yesterday, about the chick inside the egg, that I would never break someone's egg, because you can destroy life by breaking the shell of a chick's egg. But if the chick breaks through on its own, it's got life and it's its own life. And that I'm trying to encourage the chicks inside, with this poem, encourage the chicks inside the egg to break through and say, okay, you're telling me that I had a place without pain before. All I can see is this shell that holds me, conditioning that holds me in place. And it's frightening to try and break out. But if you're telling me that what's on the other side of breaking out of my shell is going to be something that is painless and is actually going to be a beautiful experience for me in my life, then go on, then I'll break through. And so probably that was a good analogy to bring to as an explanation to the poem, but I probably didn't really write it for the audience I have today.
I suppose with anything, it depends on the individual's unique perspective and their interpretation.
Yeah, and and every time you write something, there's what you know that it means, or what you think you know that it means because you wrote it, because you were the pen, you were the one with the pen in the hand. But it has a life of its own, because I was talking to a songwriter once and written loads and loads of love songs, all for different ladies. And I said, you were obviously very much in love with that person when you wrote that song. Yes, I was. Well, now that you're not in love with that person, or that she rejected you, how do you feel about the song? The song has got a life of its own, Andrew. Now, I don't sing it and feel sadness because of the fact that she wouldn't get on a plane and come and be with me, because that's what the song's singing. The song he was singing, just get on the plane, just come to London, because I'm so alone. And she didn't get on the plane, and so it really is. It's a heart-wrenching song. But he said, no. He says, I don't feel that emotion when I sing it. The song has a life of its own. So the poem has a life of its own. It means whatever you want it to mean. And I'm not upset if you don't get the same understanding that I had when I wrote it. It doesn't matter. It's how emotion, raw emotion, can affect you. That's what I'm interested in. I wrote it from a place of high emotion. When I was saying to Catherine yesterday, when I was in the life of the church, I was an evangelist. I would knock on doors. I'd go and preach on the street corner. That was the kind of faith that I had. I wanted to give it away. I didn't want to keep it to myself. I wanted other people to find the joy that I'd found in my faith. And that's what that poem is, really. It's saying, hey, you're missing out on something here. Why don't you go back to where you were before and have that transformational experience, have that shift. But if at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that to the person who hears it, that's fine, because it's written with raw emotion. And that's the best place, the only place to write your poetry from a place of raw emotion. And when you do that, then whatever meaning that comes to the listener or to the reader, that's great for them. So I'll read it again. This is before. We live in a sensory universe. We have a body that manifests or holds our divine essence. And yet, before our thoughts and feelings existed, we were and still are connected to everything and everyone. We can sense the changing energy around us. Before our mind, before the thought I am, before the idea of a body, before the idea of a world, before we were given a name, we were not separate. We knew we belonged. Through our interaction here, we began to identify ourselves as separate individuals, and so the pain began. Forget the pain, remember before. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Andrew.